Mediopolis, Chapter 3 Into an Alien World. The elderly man was an alienologist, that is, he studied alien studies. He studied others that studied aliens too. But he didn't discuss that openly, not with the home comforter, nor the other visitors either. No, he studied them, but he didn't discuss it openly, not with others. He wasn't sure what to think about it, and he wasn't sure what other people thought about it either. Still, it was something he talked and brought up a little with the home comforter that visited him, even though they only joked about it casually. A joke, something just to play around with, speculative. Even though he really was more agnostic, open-minded. Perhaps he thought there was some truth to all the alien beliefs. Perhaps it was all foolhardy, fictional, imaginative, and there was nothing in it really. Wild, speculative imagination. Or perhaps there was something in those dreams, in those weird ideas and fictions of the 21st century, of all the different fictions and ideas and dreams, the hopes and fears from all the years. Perhaps there was something in it all. Or perhaps it was all just imaginative, fictional, delusional even. But he kept his agnostic, open-minded positions on it all to himself much, and didn't really discuss all that openly, only occasionally, briefly, casually, with just those that showed some sort of interest in it. Mostly he was watching shows of humans, occasionally animals, plants, and environmental shows. But mostly there were human shows about human dilemmas, human challenges, problems, and human solutions sometimes even too. He didn't really watch openly alien shows, not when she visited, not openly around her, or the other visitors either, for that matter. They looked and watched the human show trial that he happened to be watching, and they discussed it briefly. She got drawn in a little to watching some of it. She'd watched some of the characters from the previous visits to the show before. The show within the show, as so many of them were that she saw. She got to know some of the characters that the visitors she visited loved so much as they did sometimes, or disliked them sometimes as much too. How much some of the regular characters that the clients she visited really loved and were into that much, she did get to know by name and character and could describe them fairly well. Just because she was such a regular visitor to some of those clients, and they were so attached to some of the characters that they depended on. They knew them from years, some of them, and they knew them to such detail in their character. They knew them as well as they knew their own family, really, however fictional they might be. But they found something that they depended on and that was useful for them and beneficial, whether it was factual or fictional. The old woman who had visited the home comforter, of course, was young compared to the older man. She herself felt very much that it could be useful, this interactive type of character fictional program. It could have its benefits as well as its side effects, she felt. There were good and bad in it. But she wasn't really sure, because it's something she was only discovering more and more of. She wasn't really sure quite what effect, what really were the benefits of such an interactive, fictional program, so immersive and for so long, and what really were the risks. Was it true that people suffered from fictionophobia and a fear of being in such things, or became fictophiliac and obsessive with such things, obsessed over fictional characters? Well, that didn't mean it was all wrong necessarily, therefore, though, she concluded, from the numerous visits that she'd made to others like the elderly gentleman, that did have some reliance on some of the long-term, regular fictional characters that he had depended on to some extent, though he was much less dependent perhaps today than it used to be years and years ago. She'd been watching some of the characters, not really that familiar ones, discussing some issue. He turned the volume up as he was allowing her time to read through more of the notes, adding notes to his own thoughts about what the job should be for this evening. Some of them were just not possible, others there just wasn't the time for, perhaps. And she amended some of the ideas that he'd had before showing him again, breaking him from his viewing of the actual show projected onto the wall opposite them within his lounge. I see your week was fairly average then, she said in summary, looking at the reading from the weekly outputs. A little machine that took temperature readings and also measured his heart rate, CCG, and other things, and gave average readings of how he was during the week. The home comforter looked at him a little soberly, reading from her brain book. It was a little information machine that collected the talking pen. The talking pen she had that was plugged into and scanned the reports off the light of the screen. He gave her a faint smile back. Well, I'm probably overdue some sort of episode or something, he admitted, looking back to her, watching over her rereading the smart book that she had open. Well, that's what he called it. Well, I hope it's a good episode, not something too bad, she said, stopping on some list, something she wasn't unsure about, unfazed by his silly attempts to make light of a predicament. Well, he said, after a long pause, listening to the end of an image, the sounding of a man talking. I gave them my time, my energy, my love. I just didn't want to share my sadness with them too, the man's image projected onto the wall opposite was saying. I can do about 2/3 of the job, said the home carer, now looking up from her eyes, opposite to the elderly man. The rest depends on the travel reports later, she said, in summary. Of course, as much as you can, as long as the important jobs are done, said the elderly man. They're all that matters now, he said, turning down and off the machine, projecting onto the wall opposite. Okay, but the highways are jammed. I'll try and do as much of the jobs as I can, said the home comforter, now scanning the room to do a more thorough assessment. The old man then gave her a brief smile and a nod to the comforter and was about to wheel over in his chair towards the bed area, this other space area, to leave her to it, when the large image of the questioner suddenly flicked back on. He'd nudged the remote, and it reappeared on the opposite wall once more, striding once more to the platform, closing in on the old man, the questioner once more, and the volume boomed, the audio playing in the surround sound of the room. We've all heard that you cared for your family, and you cared for society, you cared for everyone, the presenter was now saying, strolling around the man in the centre of the room, their projected images on the lounge wall, opposite the home comforter and the elderly man. We've all heard of how much you care and care about everyone. You cared about your children, you cared about your parents, you cared about yourself, went on the old man, as he rambled and walked around the stage, or the image of him was shown as doing that on the large lounge wall. What we all want to know, though, is how you've hurt your family, what you've hurt society, how you hurt others, went on the man, as his image strolled around, still gesturing, pointing out long pointed fingers, and with the crowd opposite hushed and silent, watching. The middle-aged man that was parading around, asking the questions, then stood in front of the old man, and the zoomed-in image suddenly of him shaking his head a little, with a close-up image of him, the questioned. We all hurt each other a little, began the old man. We need to hear what you did to hurt people, not what others did, began the questioner again, interrupting, and was getting a little higher rating boosters now from the audience in their voting, since he'd started questioning more firmly, it seemed. I'll take it to the air, said the elderly man, embarrassed that the volume had suddenly shot up and all these questions, unexpected, had now been launched into the room for his visiting home carer to overhear. He then muted the button carefully, turning it off, silencing. The images remained playing on the opposite wall, though, once more going back to miming again. Sorry about that, said the elderly man. And the young comforter smiled a little awkwardly and laughed it off, saying, Oh, it was nothing. She repeated again that she'd heard such things and questions from her father's show trials that he had to watch them for long times, and she'd had to visit him for many years. She repeated the old story again to him. She was used to hearing shouted things like that. Never mind it all, she said. She was too busy for work. He could listen to it if he wanted. He wouldn't distract her from the work in any case. She had her own earpiece, could listen to her own music to work to. But no, he said he'd take it behind the curtain, listen to it in private anyway. He preferred it that way with some recordings, he assured her. Take it to the air is all he said, his usual phrase. Pressing the button on the remote was simple, and then it vanished into a small earpiece that he could listen to in private. The image would flash onto a small image projected just to a screen that he would hold in front of his face, like a small book a small kind of object that he could hold, that the image could be projected on. He had different size objects, depending on what size projection he needed, but anything that would do, that was clear and that was obvious to be seen on. "It doesn't bother me what you're looking at," said the young woman, after a time, because he was looking at various different size objects that he could project onto, something that he could hold up to take away to his little bed resting area. The old woman was looking at him as he glanced through different objects that he could look at, as if they were different videos that could be projected, perhaps. "I really don't mind, you could project onto the wall or onto the lounge. It doesn't distract me from my work at all, really," she kept assuring him. No, he said once more. He really wanted to listen to it in private, he assured her, until he was quite content. He could see the images quite clearly on a small image. He really just didn't need to see that much of it. Besides, they had close-ups anyway, he assured her. The old man was now wheeling away, after he'd given his explanations, clutching all his remotes that were now dangling in a large bag, strapped to the wheelchair that rode along the spacious apartments, going zigzagging through the different sections, going through the kitchen and then through the long lounging sections where he rested, and there were lots of large couches and small tables crammed full of different magazines, journals, newspapers that he'd stacked and stored up through the times, where visitors would often sit down to talk and discuss different reports that he'd brought along with them. Wheeling past all the different tables and turning around, he went to a large spacious area that was now occupied by the wheeled bed positioned up against the wall, and wheeled up the wheelchair alongside it, where the wheeled curtains were there stretched out besides, and the curtains then wheeled out, opening themselves, stretching around one side of the bed, stretching all around 180 degrees. Finally, the curtains stretching long around one side of the bed and then around the other finally. But before they'd done, halfway, with still a small jar, he still was able to gape out and look at her across the room, looking back to her from beyond the closed curtains. The old man looked around at her, assessing her, seeing her collecting her utensils, the brooms, the mops, the brushing up kits, and all the different implements and utensils that she'd need for the cooking assignments, preparing the food, the medication and the drinks that she'd come for, that and some light cleaning duties too. The old man looked at her gradually, collecting the various instruments, the electronic gadgets too that she'd need to update him on the various electronic emails that she was editing for him. "Do you listen to the voices without looking at the people talking?" she asked finally, after she'd been looking up from the e-notes, looking out to him on the bed, and seeing that he was just sat there staring at some pictures without actually listening to anything. "Sometimes," the old man had said, now stopping and looking back up to her, over the room, still looking at the table besides the open window where she was. "Well, it depends on who's talking and what they're talking about," he stated. "Sometimes it's not necessary to see the person as well." And he wanted to plug in all the devices and so that he could recharge them at that time. But it was a large stretch and it was awkward for him to do that with her watching him all the time. So he wanted her to get on with the work before he could start doing that and adjusting all the different devices and all the different equipment that needs to be plugged in, all the different things that needs to be stretched over with the wires that needs to be untangled and loaded up into different plugs and sockets. He glanced at the window beyond, hoping for just some time to alone to do that. "Well, I can smart eye anyone I'm not on. I don't need to random street," laughed the comforter. She was sat at the window looking out. "Oh, I didn't mean that you were going to smart eye someone looking out there or anything like that," said the elderly man, looking to her, thinking she'd misunderstood. "I'm sure you could do. I thought maybe you'd like to smart eye the stars or something." He noticed that she had the smart eye, the implement, out on the table by the window place, and had been looking at that. Well, that wasn't necessary for one of the duties she had to do there, not only the duties written down that was on the list of jobs to do or anything. "I like to smart eye a few of them, perhaps, but I don't think I could get the zoom in," said the home comforter, sat there, looking at the instrument too. The old man laughed. "I expect you'd like to give the stars a smart talking to, perhaps." She laughed faintly backwards, but he didn't really know if she found it really funny, or if it was a fake laugh perhaps. Well, I don't care for the stars, not so much, so I don't really think they think me smart, really, because they're all so distant, she said, staring out the window now. And they were. Only a few of them were visible now, because it was early evening, and still a little too light to see them much. But she stared at the few that were visible, faintly, distantly, dreamily. Why don't you stare out? See them more. You should learn to care for them, get to know them, even the distant ones, said the man, recommending then to her a good astrological Eve star, something that she could really look through and examine, something with a good zoom that he recommended for her, so that she could see the far-flung distant stars at great detail, and that would give her an augmented reality overlaying it, telling her about the different names and information about the constellations too, the historical informations. Oh, she was bored of hearing about it all too, and didn't understand half the terms. Why don't you do that if you're that interested in it all, she said, gazing out the window more. You should learn to care for them. I haven't got the time to. Too busy caring for people. Worried about distant stars, she muttered, turning back to the journals and looking at the long list of jobs still to do. The medication, the cleaning, the drinks preparations. It didn't take that long. It's just that they were all expert things that needed a lot of time and energy and focus on. She needs to be very careful about getting the exact measurements for the very specific requirements, so that the actual medications were exacting, because the actual things she was putting in were very potent, and so a small mistake either way could actually have very bad side effects potentially. While there'd been a few mild, very small mistakes in the past, nothing too serious, a small double dosage, a small treble dosage once even, that was rare, but they were only very, very small amounts, very mild effects, and very rarely did that ever happen. She was normally very focused and cautious in those things. Still, it did take up some time because there were so many of those medications to get through in the evening. Oh, gazing about stars when there were people to care for and there's so much to do, she thought, thinking he's probably got all the time in the world to read countless hours and waste years of his life thinking about abstract or far-flung distant places and remote places she could never hope to get to anyway. Who knows, she thought. Maybe one day we'll travel to distant stars. Maybe they'll come to us in the future. You never know, suggested the old man. They may have technologies that we don't, he suggested. How many starlings have visited you, then? Said the young woman, turning to him, looking, asking playfully, but he wasn't sure whether it was just a playful question or... Many, back in the day. A long, long time ago, though. They had their star stories, of course, but now they're distant stars. I could never reach them. We're separated now, of course, said the old man, turning away from her gaze. I used to know many stars from many planets, he claimed. Yes, you told me, long ago, when lots of people could travel. But now who can afford to? Said the older woman. She was now turning back to her notes, looking once more, as if somehow worried about the notes that she'd made on the notes. Well, there are travel scholarships that you can get. You have to have the right skills and get the right assessment forms. It takes a lot to get to other alien planets, began the old man. My alienating skills are only average at best. Even if your alienating is better than mine, I haven't got a hope, really. It would take me years to get there, said the woman. In half a joke, perhaps. Or was she serious? Only because I had to do it. Because if you get alienated, you'd be a lot better than me. If you got alienated, you would be. It's just doing it. If you had to, then you would do it. For better or worse. So you can adapt. If you've got to, you've got to. I spent a long time having to do it a long, long time ago. And then I had to be de-alienated as well. Couldn't even say it. I'm too old, though, to leave Earth behind. I couldn't do it again. You can always get re-alienated. Is that the word they call it? Said the home comforter, looking up from the notes, trying to remember what he'd said, going over the refrigeration areas where the food was stored. She was walking over to that area just to examine it, to see if he had all the ingredients that were needed to put the medications together. Sometimes there hadn't been all the information in stock that she'd needed sometimes in the past. But fortunately, mercifully looking inside the fridge, there seemed now to be all the correct amounts of the different dosages that were required. He watched her going through it all, thinking back to their past conversations, all the weird talk that had somehow become normal of being alienated, de-alienated, re-alienated, and all the re-earthated, and all the other things. That sounded like a weird, strange fiction to begin with. You can always get re-alienated again. What on earth did that even mean? He watched her, thinking perhaps she was just saying it in jest, just thinking it was just some joke or something, and not perhaps even a metaphor. Searching through the fridge units, she found all the different food containers, sorting through different stacks and loaded them into different piles on top of the work surfaces so that she could prepare them in the correct dosages later. If the right offer comes in from the right planet, I'd consider it, she said. But with my average ratings right now, I would only be going to an average planet at best, and there wouldn't be any point in that. I'd be exchanging something I know, at least, for something I just don't know. A stranger world, an alien world. I just don't know. I'd rather do with something that I do know, she said, trying to explain to him her reasoning. You're the one who's always talking about the stars and going on about it to me. Maybe you should start thinking about how to get there or something, said the older man, not wanting to go on about it. Well, you're the one who always went on about it. I never mentioned anything about stars to anyone before I started visiting you. I did it because it's something you talked about in the past and seemed to care about. That's the only reason I went on and on about it. Because you're the one, and I thought you were interested and enjoyed it. I was talking about it because it's what you did, she complained back at him, annoyed now. The fact that he'd accused her of going on about something that he'd invented and surrounded her by, weeks of stories and narratives she put up with and tolerated, all that pseudo-intellectual rubbish, rambo, jambo, mumbo, jumbo, speculative rubbish fiction he surrounded himself, whatever it was, an escape or a metaphor as he called it. She'd only started doing it over the weeks because it's something she felt he was familiar with, and out of respect to him, and perhaps feeling it would be some way that he could relate to her or what she was trying to say sometimes. Why had she done it? Was it encouraging this fantasia, this fantasy addiction or delusion, as some of her family thought it was? I talk about the toilets. I talk about the swamps and oceans. I talk about anything. It doesn't mean I want to live there or actually live on another planet, does it though? Said the old man, angry, opposite, explaining, sitting up from the wheelchair bed. I talk about all different places, all different things. It doesn't mean I actually want to live there all the time or anything. Yes, but you're always going on about the stars, other planets, aliens and things. You were always, complained the home comforter. Well, I wasn't always, not always. And I'm not always happy about them either, am I? Asked the older man. You're always talking about funny stories about them, the young woman said. In the early days, you had so many funny stories about aliens, and then it was just angry trials about aliens, angry divorces of aliens, everything. It all became angry aliens talk, and it got too much. She finally had snapped and shouted at him. Why had he accused her of all this? You're always telling me funny stories, said the older man after some thought. Telling me funny stories about your family, about other clients that you visit. Yes, that's about people. Funny stories about other people I meet, said the home comforter, feeling she was talking to some sort of delusional madman sometimes. That's not the same thing as talking about aliens, made-up people, fictional people. However funny they were, it's just going on too much about things that aren't even real, though, she complained, now feeling a little sorry for him that she'd gone on about him, got angry so much, and too quick in her visit. She came over sympathetically towards the bed that he was now perched on the side of, sitting now in the old wheelchair where he'd ridden over before on, perching on it, coming down to his level, and sitting now nearby him, and talking more softly to him. I'm sorry, it just got too much sometimes, too much of the alien talk. I'd talk back to you in that talk just because I felt you were more comfortable with it. That's all, she tried to explain to him. Well, I'm sorry too. I'm sorry. I did like hearing about your family too, even if they were alien to me. Not alien. They were strangers to me. Sorry," said the older man. And she looked at him briefly and offered a half smile that was partly happy, but partly unsure what he meant by that. She then looked away from him, unsure whether to look at him because he had a strange look, confused himself. "It doesn't mean awful things didn't happen on those planets," said the older man, still now watching her, as she looked away, rummaging through the notes once more, but as if searching for an escape away from his glare. "Stop going on about made up planets or other things. I don't know what you're talking about," she said, meeting his eyes finally. "The other planets may have existed, or did exist, things I can't remember," said the old man. She didn't know whether to play along with him, or whether he was perhaps delusional somehow. She finally did look back at him, a little surprised, at the sudden burst of temper, or was it acting? "Well, I'm sorry. Sorry whatever happened to here, or whatever happened on your planet," she said. "Whatever happened on your planet, maybe we can talk about it whenever the right time is, if there ever was a planet," she said. "Well, there was a planet. I don't know and I don't remember it. But I know that there was some sort of planet I lived in before. I told you, it's a planet of amnesia, an amnesiac planet. Did I tell you that?" Yes, we heard all about that," said the home carer, not needing to go through all the notes again. "I had alien counselling long ago. It's okay, though." Yes, and I know all about that too," said the home comforter, not wanting to get drawn into all this. Why had she given him that alien joke? Wasn't it encouraging him? "You need more than just alien counselling," she said. "Perhaps you need alien love. Or human love, perhaps," she said, trying to meet his eyes. But he was really staring almost through her, through the room itself, into something else, as if so deep in thought. I'm too old and I'm too ill to be adopting aliens or people or families or anything strange I don't know." And she touched him after a brief while, making him jump a little. "You're never too old. You're not too old. There are probably centurions, millenniums out there. And they're being adopted by people too. They were in your stories when you used to tell them," she said, almost trying to reassure him. But he didn't look reassured, and he stared blankly away from her. "Well, not with my ratings. No, not now. No." He said he was upset. His ratings had plummeted. He'd recently just not been able to put on any show. He wasn't performing well. Didn't know anything to say. Didn't know what to say. He'd become so ill and old. It wasn't something to show to people. It wasn't something to be proud of. It wasn't something to take glory in or something to revel in any way. Not something to honour. It's something he was ashamed of, disgusted in. It was something that just was. Something that was difficult, embarrassing, awkward. No wonder his ratings had plummeted, he said, and he complained about it. But in some ways, perhaps she said he was happy that there was no one watching. He didn't need to have people watching, did he? She tried to reassure him. Your ratings are your responsibility. And it's not really the end of the world. It's not the end of your life, even. You don't need great ratings. God knows, lots of people have survived on mediocre ratings, even average ratings sometimes. Sometimes you have no ratings, sometimes good ratings. It all averages out. She said it pleadingly to him, trying to reassure him, because he looked so disdainful, so upset, so distant from her. Even when his eyes met her, he seemed to be glaring to a distant, foreign, alien place. She couldn't know where it was or what it was he was thinking about, though. Yes, she heard his words, but didn't really understand why he was saying that or what it really meant. We've all got to try and be responsible. Doesn't matter about the ratings. Stop worried about that. It will all average out. It will pick up in the end. Great ratings before, terrible ratings now. Okay, who cares? Think of the bigger picture. One picture's terrible, another picture's great. You just have to see it averages out. So what if you're an average rater in the end? I've them great average raters. She still went on pleading. And she played it to him many times before. Sometimes he did seem to accept some of what she was saying, and other times he seemed resistant and seemed to resist her and seemed to protest even. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't want to talk about it all anymore, okay? I just rather not. Well, you're the one who brought it all up, she spat back. I'll try not to lower it with anything too vulgar, he said, pointing to the machine. And he was about to put on a picture. Well, put on whatever you want to. It's okay. You're not going to lower my ratings by putting something dirty on anyway, because I wouldn't know whatever it was, she said reassuringly. No, it's okay. I'm not going to put on anything, nothing too dull and nothing too vulgar either. And I'm not projecting images around you. Well, you can if you want to. I won't react to them. It's okay, I'm not going to. I've got my own little image, and I just don't need a big one right now, he said reassuringly. And he turned away to the bed and got the object out to put the image projector towards. You play a little risky, and the work is a little risky too sometimes, stated the old man after a while, assessing her past performances, looking at some of her shows and the ratings before. You think I should take more risks, perhaps? She asked, raising an eyebrow, looking over to him, clutching at some of her notebooks now. Looking at the pictures that he'd collected during the week that were placed along the table. What on earth was she meant to do with those various pictures? There was one collected for each day of the week. They were meant to summarise how he'd been that day, and she was meant to put those pictures together in some sort of order to summarise what they meant to her, as all the other home comforters visiting would do too, as if it would somehow make some sense in interpreting the pictures or the dreams he'd had each day. You shouldn't be taking out, not with a reason. You shouldn't be taking them out, not with a reason, stated the old man, seeing that she was getting the pictures out on the table. Well, you're saying have a reason, but there were the reasons that you put down, and I was only going by your reasons, actually, she said, trying to explain. But those were the old reasons, and didn't you get the updates on those that I'd resent later? Oh, sometimes the risks that you took, said the old man, the risks that you took on some of the past shows, I don't know, sometimes they were good, sometimes they were not. Sometimes it's what made you redeemable even, and that's what made you likeable to me. I don't know, that's perhaps why I invited you. That's why I first... They were irrational risks, sometimes. And she sat there, watching, listening to him, absorbing now a little, considering what he was saying. You made rational choices sometimes, but it was the irrational choices, the zany things that you did suddenly, the quick dance with that guy. I mean, there was the time that you sort of made someone do a poem in front of his visitors, and the time when you, made someone dress up in that costume he'd always wanted to, and in front of the family that he hadn't seen for ages. They were just amazing times. I thought some of these choices, yes, some of them didn't work out, and some of the family were a little shocked and upset, but sorry. Sometimes there were a few funny things in that, and I know a few of them didn't work out. But the times that did, they were great. And I think it's those irrational things that sometimes, no, not irrational, just sometimes things that you wouldn't have thought of, a little out there, left field, something just different. And they were sensational, but small things. And I think it's those things that I found really moving and uplifting. And that's what attracted me to you in the first place, really. I just found it so sensational, but in a small and almost reassuring way. He said it all in his speech in a way to try and explain to her his whole reaction to the videos that he was showing her. Yes, well, I suppose some of it was just an experiment, really, and we were trying it out. And obviously the clients had gone along with it, and I'd gotten to know them fairly well by then anyway. Yeah, most of them that you've seen there did work out reasonably well. Yeah, a few of them didn't, perhaps. And we couldn't have known about all of the risks. Sometimes they weren't honest about them, really, and they weren't as upfront about the family that were visiting on that occasion, she said, pointing to an image. The few other occasions that didn't work out, similar reasons. They just weren't always as open about why they were going into it as they could have been, really. Other than that, some of the things did work out quite well, But, it does depend on the situation. I got the help and support of what to do from the company, so I couldn't take credit for that anyway. Well, no, but it's because you were with that company that you got a good rating. I mean, the company have a good rating too. Yeah, I'd like to think so, she said, agreeing, because of course she had to, because she was with the company at the time. Even though the ratings were fairly average, they were doing fairly well. There had been a few fairly good shows, and a modest amount of reasonably good ones too. Occasionally bad ones, but those weren't too often at least. And so the ratings were reasonably good, if not excellent ever. Hardly ever at all, anyway. They had a brief talk through some of her more interesting past visits to other interesting clients, a few that he'd talked to just occasionally in the time that he'd been going through the procedures, getting to know each other to begin with. She laughed over his assessments of her past shows and the different ratings about it. I don't know what you're on about, really. I mean, that's just your ideas about it. You've only seen a few of the shows, to be honest. I mean, look at all the other ones and then decide. Just look at the highlights if you want to. And then let me know if you want to go on to do other shows and take it forwards. But, it's up to you, she said, now trying to sort of anchor it in to the next proposed show that they discussed earlier, in their earlier visits. No, reasonable. I want something rational, but not too rational. Look at the things that have happened in our past shows, and I'll consider any proposal, as long as it's not too out there, I suppose. Well, thanks. We will certainly consider the proposals, and, I don't get to decide on that, as you know. But once the company let me know, then we can go forwards and make the decisions, she said, now closing down the machine that he'd been looking at the past visits on. And she'd been showing him them just to so he had something visual to go alongside those different images that he'd been looking at, to look at the different highlights from over the last few months of the visits of hers, to consider more about the proposal of her taking forwards in a more of a show venture for them. Well, I will certainly consider it all more when I've got time to, he said. Well, make sure all the machines are operated as well as you can. You're inside the machine, remember? It does take a lot of concentration, a lot of focus. Our talking now is a distraction from the work, said the older man, looking over to the different apartment rooms, the different parts of the apartment. It was an open-plan apartment. He could look out over the different sections of the apartment. The kitchen section, the lounge, the long hallway that wove in between the lounges, and the different open spaces where the bed could be parked up and wheeled, as it was now with the wheelchair alongside it. And then the open window section, where the table could be parked up, and the different lounge sections, where the different couches could be remotely controlled and wheeled to. It's just making sure the machines are all properly and running smoothly, making sure they're all stocked up and everything's in place, went on the old man, surveying the room to see what the work was and where it would be done. I'd rather that you focus now on that, and that the conversation was before and after, he went on, watching her now silently as she began the work, returning to her utensils and positioning them into the different places where the work would need to be done by, and making sure that all the different kitchen implements and the machinery there was working correctly and turned on. Sorry, what you were saying, said the home comforter, giving a brief smile back, looking up to him. About the machines? Is there any fault with them or anything I should know? No. They've had reasonable ratings this week so far. Nothing urgent to let you know on that, except to say that some of the actual refrigerator machines are lower than they should be. But that shouldn't be a problem right now, he said, looking up to her from the notes. He smiled faintly, awkwardly, just tryingly. Well, call me if there's any sort of problem or anything, he said now, looking down at the object he was holding, with the projected image from the machine that was attached around him. Yeah, sure. Well, I'll call you if there's any issue or anything, she nodded to him, holding the mop and bucket now, prepared to mop the floor around the area, knowing that he wouldn't be able to leave that area for a while. Okay, I think I will. The highways will be fine. Looking clear so far, then, said the home carer, giving him a nod. And pressing a button, the curtains then mechanically drove around the bed, covering up the rest of the area where he was sleeping and resting within. "Good," said the old man, and before he left, she had the faces of some of the older women that were projected onto a kitchen wall, beaming out from a small projector that was positioned on one of the kitchen surfaces. The images projected out onto the kitchen wall were of a young person's show, who was a serious young woman, the image of her, seriously, and it was beamed onto the wall, an image of her looking friendly enough, strolling around, casual, smiling. "Good morning, good day, good evening, and good night, whenever, wherever you are, on these top universal stories. These are the top universal stories trending right now," began the older woman's voice, and it was speaking to her with her earphones plugged in so that she could hear it clearly while she was glancing up occasionally at the image that was also miming along to the actual spoken words. The older woman's voice was saying, and the older man left her now to her work, resting in his bed with his notes, listening to the commentators, who she would glance over to occasionally, retiring now to his bed. The old man rewound the earlier show trial that he'd been watching and listening to earlier on, before her interruption, so that he could watch over the earlier parts. He looked over the scheduled future shows too, the ones to look at later and the ones to consider watching too. The home comforter had prepared the meals, the drinks, and the medications for the older man, listening to her various stories and glancing up at the projected images occasionally as relevant when something sensational seemed to happen or something sensational was sounded, perhaps. As she cleaned away the various areas of the room, mopping, brushing, dusting, cleaning, moving, and placing things back to where they were before cleaned, she performed a little occasional song and a song dance while she was even doing some of the cleaning. That sent the ratings a little higher, but she only had a small group rating following her. Someone didn't like her humour perhaps though she was only laughing about a funny incident the lyrics reminded her of. Maybe some of the audience thought she was laughing at the lyrics, not despite them. Who knew? Yet her travel guides reported the roads were relatively clear now. The travel guides had reported this, interrupting her programme, so she knew she had an extra 20 minutes or so to have a longer chat with the old man at the end of the jobs, when she telephoned him from the smartphone, and his recordings from the show trial analysis were again interrupted. They discussed the various shopping lists and the substitute lists also of the products that the old man had needed out at the show shopping, even though she could easily have clarified what he meant through a series of distant calls, perhaps, though that could take longer. She was able to inspect him physically and see how he was, and offer some sympathy as well in her gestures, which the older man denied wanting though. Yet he still proceeded to explain to her the latest symptoms that he had, going into more detail about the reports that he had gathered for her too. She could not comment on the specifics of the case, yet offered anecdotal stories of her former clients who had recovered from similar sounding symptoms, or those that had had similar symptoms and perhaps were still looking for treatments. This provoked the older man to next explain more fully to her and whoever else might be watching, though he doubted if anyone would these days. His ratings had slumped long ago. He didn't really have any viewers, none that he expected anyway. The full extent of his position he then tried to explain, though he never could clearly, really. Tried just to go into the briefest of details, of the important things, identifying how he was in a different position to those others. He began explaining that he wasn't like those other clients, although they had similar symptoms or similar conditions to his own, though his were quite different because he had a number of conditions and in very different circumstances. And he tried to explain that. The comforter had stated then, after his explanation, and that the comforter had then stated that maybe if he searched, there may be others that did have all those other conditions too, though those would be much harder perhaps to find. They may have found more answers to the combined problems that he was experiencing, she suggested. She had suggested this, and he'd accepted it was technically possible. Who knew? Maybe there were others out there with very similar circumstances, if not exactly the same, then similar enough that could perhaps understand some of the problems, if not know exactly what the solutions were. Although it still appeared as something unlikely. How on earth will he ever find such people that had such similar symptoms and so many different conditions that he was experiencing? So he still appeared quite sullen, moody, sad with this answer, and was slumped in his chair, a little despondent still with her. It seemed a most unlikely prospect to him that he would find anyone that really could give him sensible, reliable advice on the things he desperately needed help and advice on. Still, she clutched at more straws for him and spoke of unexpected treatments that did appear out the blue and things that did happen sometimes. You never really knew. Miracle cures, she even said sometimes, that could happen when no one was expecting it. Yes, he admitted, sometimes it could happen, but he didn't really seem cheered up because he didn't really expect it to happen. And it was so rare that such things ever were proven of ever really happening. So he still seemed a little despondent, despite her attempts, and her many attempts to cheer him up. The old man had to admit there remained some possibility, perhaps, of a miracle cure or an unexpected treatment. Whoever knew? But his dwelling in total despair was exposed, perhaps, as alien, as attention seeking, or a lack of effort to overcome his depressions. Perhaps there was some hope, however small, he didn't know how. The older man remained, in part despair, in part hope, though, stating that often no breakthrough could happen, or that no treatment can exist, or that maybe no treatment may be found for him. He was stuck with that more likely possibility. Well, who knew what was possible? But it still remained a possibility for him. The possibility that it might not heal up, the condition might just get worse, that there was no new job, no new relationship, or no family, or no new treatment, anything waiting for him, no new anything for him. He said to the home comforter, that was a possibility for him that he just had to live with, had to accept. That was a possibility for his life. So he had to live in part despair as well as part hope, because nothing was guaranteed or sure in his life. He said all this trying to explain to her clearly so that she just understood how he was, how he felt, the situation he was in. Home comforter listened and nodded along, seeming to understand, agreeing in part. It's hard giving things up, she said, and hard losing things too. Just as it's hard taking things on, it's hard giving things up. It's hard finding things, it's hard losing things, she said. As if this was a conclusion that seemed to satisfy them both in some ways, recognizing that he was going through a hardship. Of course, she was referring also to other hardships, one that she herself had been involved in. So do you think I could be one of the care shows? I could go on one of the care shows or something, one of these days? She said after their long talk, finishing the dregs of her tea that they'd shared together, after a tea and a chat. The old man had sat on the chair besides now the empty bed. He got out of the old empty bed, once she'd called over, pressing the button. The curtains had then opened themselves, presenting him, smartly poised on top of the chair, expectantly, with the bed empty beside him, unmade. As if he'd just sat there, waiting for her all the time. Although the bed covers looked all strewn about the place, as if someone had been wrestling about with something in there. Though with her, he appeared as calm, straightened out, even unruffled, composed. No, with me you won't, stated the old man. I don't think that I would be very good on a care show, or any of those things, he said. Why not? Asked the comforter, taking the sheets off the bed and then shaking the crumbs onto the floor, and the hairs too, flapping about with the sheets. The old man then watched her. Well, I don't think that I'm that ill, to be honest. I don't have a rare disease or anything. I'm not that funny, and I'm not that weird, and I'm not that interesting either, really, began the old man. Well, you don't have to be that ill or even that interesting, said the home carer. There's lots of people that make it viral. There's lots of people that become popular just doing something a little funny or something a little... She looked over to him, unsure what word to use now. You do get on a show that has any decent ratings, though. That's the problem. I mean, what different shows have different ratings? What kind of care show would you want to get onto? Asked the old man, uncertain about the care shows. Well, I don't know. I mean, a nice care show, a family care show. A family care show? Asked the old man, confused. Yes, a friendly care show, a family care show. Something that's about caring for families, caring for friends. Why not care for strangers? Why not a strange care show? Asked the old man. Well, I don't know, because it's hard to care for strangers. I guess if I got to know them, I don't know. I only know family care shows, to be honest. There's thousands of them, but there's just too many to choose from, really. A funny family care show, that's what I want, really. One of the dance family shows. One of the dance care shows, Have you seen them? Asked the carer. But no, the old man shook his head. He didn't know anything about dance care shows. Never seen them, never heard of them. What's a dance care show, he said. Oh, well, I'll show you some of them later. I mean, I'm not expecting you to go on that one. It wouldn't be right for you, not in your condition. I mean, it's not right for everyone. But, I mean, you could find something else, maybe. A talk dance show. No. A talk care show. Something else for you, though. I mean, I don't know you well enough to know what kind of care show. But me, I like the dance care show. There were just so many different kinds of dance care shows, Well, you don't know, but I'll show you them. I'll show you some of the videos of them. The home comforter explained the dance care shows that she'd been a part of, that she'd enjoyed visiting and dancing with clients in. And he agreed to look through some of those later on, although that wouldn't be part of the proposal for the type of care show that she wanted him to go on, though. Well, perhaps I could learn to be more caring as well, she said, after watching one of the videos and seeing one of the other dancing clients had almost slipped from a fall during one of the incidents. That was just one of the occasions. He was a bit older and just rushed into it, really. I didn't know him that well, but, he was okay afterwards, and he danced through it, and he learnt a lot, she said, trying to explain. And anyway, it wasn't a serious fall. He was okay. She said this as an explanation, but there were other videos that they watched that weren't of people just falling over all the time. People that were older having fun dancing with their partners, or alone sometimes too, or with her, the dance coach, as she was back then. I don't know, maybe it's that you need to be very sick to be on one of the top care shows, because if you are very ill, then it allows the person to show off how well they are at caring. Somebody that has exceptional care needs really needs an exceptional carer. Someone that's a good cook, cleaner, washer up, someone that's a good counsellor, someone that's good multitasker, someone that could include you socially, emotionally, someone that can provide your physical needs too. Someone that is an expert in 8 or 9 different subjects that are all each complex, and to perform all of those really well, to be counselling, mediating, advocating, medicating, preparing meds, and also doing the food, the cleaning, the washing, the cooking, the counselling, combining all those things. Oh, you forgot the shopping. Combining all those things is a really difficult, complex challenge for someone with a really complex disease and an illness that's not understood well, and I think you just need to have something that's really exceptionally ill to require an exceptional carer to make it onto one of the exceptional care shows. That was the old man's explanation behind it anyway. Do you mean to say that to be an exceptional home carer, I've got to care for people that have exceptional illnesses? Asked the home carer, questioningly, sat there now on the homemade bed. She'd made it all up straightened, tucked in all the sheets nice and comfortable, and straightened it all out, so it looked nice and straight, and she's now sat straightened herself, questioning him, looking at him, unsure. Well, no, I suppose it's not absolutely necessary. I mean, you could care for a variety of different people, perhaps. I mean, there would be a challenge in that too, wouldn't there? Yes, yes, she said after a time of thought. I suppose I am doing that. I'm trying to care for lots of different people who all have lots of different conditions. But no, I'm not caring for one person with lots of different exceptional conditions, she said, explaining her own position right now. Well, do you want to get on to an exceptional care show? I mean, what's wrong with just being on one of the other care shows? Asked the older man, looking up to her from the wheelchair, still clutching his e-notes that he'd been watching before, though it wasn't necessary now, as if it was some protection or something. I don't know. It would be nice for some of their friends and family to see what I do at work, and also for future employers or anyone really. It's nice when you meet someone that they can see a little bit about what you're about, don't you think? So I don't just have to tell people this is what I do. I could just show them, oh, this is my kind of work, and it shows them, and that way they get to sort of decide whether they do want to do it. Well, the old man laughed. I get to decide as well, and I'm interested to know what your proposals actually are for our care show. Well, I don't really think it's absolutely necessary to have that many people watching, or it's not something that I think people will be that interested in studying or learning much about anyway. No, but I thought more for your benefit and my own as well, just because I think it would be good for us to get to know each other more, because we did have some common interests, of course. Yes, yes, the older man said after a moment's thought. Yes, I suppose we do have lots of common interests, and that's why the programme selected us together. But I just. He then trailed off. You have your doubts, said the home comforter, sat there now staring at him. He looked away and avoided her eye contact a few times now, and he finally met hers and looked her back. I've just got my whole doubts about whether making it into a show is really necessary in any way. I just don't know really. It's not actually that it's making it a show. The fact that it's a show is secondary. The fact that there's a record there so that we're able, both of us and the others, to look back on what's happened so that we can review each other. I can see where you've been, you can see where I've been. We know where we are in our journey together. And it's going to be like that together as a family. That's what my family show has been. We've lived and grown together as a family. So we've always looked back together as a family since we went onto the family show. So my family show basically, she began now her sales pitch going into full throttle. It's basically the family show is where we get to look back regularly together as a family. We review each other as a family. So we have regular look backs, family look backs together. I'll look back individually with each other occasionally. Well, it depends on the type of relationship, we have family look backs, family sessions, and that's where as a family we'll all look back on the last few weeks or the months, whatever's relevant, for the time. So when you're joining the family show, to begin with at least, you'll get to look back on the most recent things, the most recent episodes of the family show, the last few weeks, months, and the last few hours and days of those people you'll be meeting at least. It's not relevant for you to know everything about all areas of the family show we're in, just those people you're going to be participating with, those you'll be involved with. Okay? She finally asked, looking up to him for now some sort of confirmation that he'd understood, been following her line of reasoning well enough. Yes, I suppose so. I mean, you've sent me the details of those people I'm likely to be involved in, your other family members and that. Yes, I suppose when I get to meet them more at the family show, then I'll get to know more about who they are, really. Yes, and no. I mean, yes, you'll get to know them more about who they are in terms of interacting with them, the home comforter now answered in explanation. But you'll also get to know them much more by watching some of the videos, and they'll get to watch you and me and how we've been getting along in our journey together over the last few weeks. Since I did explain that was happening, they were viewing us. Yes, he interrupted. You did explain all of that. I knew that they'd be viewing it, of course. I knew that they would see us, the people that I'd be meeting. Right, she said in confirmation. They'll have watched the videos of our interactions, us working together, our talks over the last few weeks. You'll get to see some of them, how they are with me and each other, just the ones that you'll be meeting in the family show. And then we'll all meet together during our first episode together. But we'll have watched each other interacting with those we're going to meet a little just before then. Okay, so then you'll feel more comfortable about the people you're meeting as well. We'll all have watched each other a little bit, but it doesn't mean we know each other that well, Right, the home comforter said, as if he didn't fully understand everything about it all yet. I still need to get to know and watch some of their videos. I mean, I have watched a little bit about some of them. I feel like I know them reasonably well, and from your stories also that you've talked about them. I tried to talk as much as I could about them, those that you'd be meeting, so that you could also view their videos too, about each other and me, and also the videos they made about you, because they have already watched the recent episodes of us together. Yes, I've got all that, said the old man, as if he felt she was patronising him and explaining just to a simpleton, as if he was a child in her adult world that he didn't understand well or something. When he was really an adolescent, he did understand reasonably well, a lot of it, but there were still things that he had doubts about and didn't quite understand fully. But I mean, the other people in the house, those that I'm not familiar with yet, they are also part of the family show too, but they're not going to be part of our family show, or they will be, or... He trailed off with the question left unanswered. Well, they are part of their family show, not part of your family show. But there is a bigger family show, the family series, that the other family shows are also part of too. But your family show will only be about those that you have watched and those that you know. Okay, so, but those people in your family show, the ones that you have gotten to know or will be getting to know, they are going to be in contact with others on the other family shows. I mean, there's loads of family shows, you know that. All the family shows are connected to each other as part of the society show. But you're only going to be on our family show, okay? So it's only your family show that you'll be part of, but the other family shows will be connected and featured as part of society show. So social show, or society show, that features lots of different family shows. Yours is just one of many that you're entering into. They're all connected, but you don't need to know about all of those. You won't be part of most of those. You might be invited to a few of those if you get to meet others that will be invited onto your family show. I mean, it's yours and other people's. It's mine and all those other people's too that are on there. Right, said the old man, now finally listening and understanding more. So there are the other shows that are linked and that are part of it. They feature other people that are visiting from other shows. Exactly, they feature others from other shows, and that are part of the show, but they are part of other shows, not the same show. So those footage, their footage won't be shown on it at all. Okay, so if the only footage of them of others is what they're shown off inside the house in the family show, and that's everything that abides by the family show rules that you've read through, right? And so that family show that you're going into, that only features people that have been invited and that have visited there, friends of the family show and the family on the family show, okay? If you got other shows, other family shows, other friend shows, okay, that's your business, it's up to you. But in this family show, under the contract, when you agree to it, you can only invite people that adhere to the family show rules of our family show, okay? So as long as you're sure about that, I mean, it's entering into this family show and just knowing what it is. You've met some of the family show members. Those family show members are those people that you'll be interacting with only on your family show. The other family shows you might hear about, you might even see images and watch occasional episodes and parts of, but you won't be on and you won't be invited to, okay? You can't invite people to the family show unless they agree to the family show rules, okay, that you have to be part of. Right, okay, well, I'll look through all of the family show rules. I will assess it all more when I know more about it. I've got a lot to decide on and think about because there's a lot of family shows, to be honest. The old man had explained it. Yeah, of course, that there is no hurry, no rush. Just take your time, make your own decision, and contact us. Contact me, the rest of the family, the other family members that you have been in contact with. Contact any of us whenever you've made a decision, said the home comforter. Now feeling that she had clearly explained it more fully to him, and he seemed to understand at least now. If you do have any more questions, any queries, anything at all, just get in contact with me. Ask me anything about any of the rules, any of the house rules for the house show, because we need to be absolutely clear on what those are before you can invite anyone into it. And before you go into it yourself, right, you've got to be absolutely clear on what those are. If you've got any queries whatsoever, contact me or any of the other family members that you've been in contact with, okay? Finally, he nodded. Okay, well, I'll look through it. I will decide and take time. Absolutely, you take your time and think it all over, she said. She gave him a pat on the shoulder, almost reassuringly, and wasn't sure, a little awkward. He rose and stood before her, and almost wanted to give her a handshake, but refrained from doing so at least. Finally, they parted company, saying goodbye to each other. Well, perhaps I could be more caring. I don't know. Perhaps some people say I'm not caring enough, but we can all learn to be more caring, can't we? Said the home comforter as she was about to leave and put back on the large coat that she had to wear for the cold outside. I could be more caring. I'm sorry if I'm not more sort of open or friendly sometimes, she began, looking at the older man. Well, in what ways? I mean, I think you're fairly caring, he said, trying to reassure her. Well, you tell me. You're the one that needs caring for. Tell me what I can do if I need to care for you more, or better, or somehow different, she said to him, struggling on with the coat, and he went to try and help her on, but really she could do it on her own, and she struggled with one arm and then with the other. I didn't say I wanted to care more, though. I just have to care differently. It's just trying to learn how to care, adapt differently to every unique situation, I guess, she said, finally struggling with the coat on. Well, I suppose it's meeting so many different people as you do and having to adapt so much, he said reassuringly. Yes, I suppose it is that. Keeps life interesting, though. And I suppose it will be like that for you, too, when you're moving into the family show. Even if you've gotten to know some of the family a little, but you'll get to know them a lot more once we're all living and interacting with each other together, she said, now walking with him to the glass door as they strode along together. I don't know. Are you really happy here being alone so much? She said, looking around the large empty apartment, seeing the empty couch, the empty bed distant now from them, the empty table, with the empty chairs scattered about the place. Are you really, don't you find it just so alone so much of the time, though? She said, looking around the empty spaces. No, he said after a long silence. Not always. Well, not so much. Sometimes, sometimes people make me happy. I make other people happy sometimes. Well, I used to. Well, you're not making me into anything. Sometimes being alone sometimes makes me happy. Sometimes it makes me sad, though, said the older man. I don't know. It doesn't make me into anything. I sometimes feel sad alone. But sometimes I feel happy and content. I don't know. I feel all sorts of things alone. Sometimes happy, sometimes sad. The home carer stopped to listen to him. But you're so much time alone. You must really think about going to visit a family of some sort. It doesn't have to be a show family like ours is, but it might be a good thing for you. There's a lot of good things to consider within it, she said, now waiting for him at the door, once more to search for the door remote. But he didn't have to search long now, because it was hung up in the correct place, where the door remote would be hung, positioned in a nice place with all the other remotes. So you don't mind making yourself happy or sad, then? You'd rather just other people didn't do it, perhaps, said the home comforter, looking round the empty room once more. You don't want to be around other people, perhaps, is it? She said, a little confused. Right, I guess it is that sometimes, said the older man. Seeing now that everything was all straightened out, all the wires that were disconnected from each other and now all hung up in the correct place, now he found the door connection and was able to press the button to open it for her. Well, I can understand not wanting to make others sad. I get that. But you know what? You could be depriving others of the happiness as well. You know, she said, touching him on the shoulder as he was turned an angle towards the door. I just don't want to share any sadness or my anger or any of the upset with anyone, to be honest, blurted out the older man. No, but you should try to find the right time when you can share happiness with others too, said the home carer, and offered him a faint smile on leaving. There he returned to her. I just don't know. I don't know sometimes how. I don't know if I've got any joy left to share sometimes. Sometimes I feel so sad, so upset and so sick sometimes. I don't know that I have any joy left or energy sometimes, explained the old man. Well, perhaps find the time, she said calmly to him. Find the time when perhaps you do and you can contact others at the right time and right place. If you ever do feel well enough to, she suggested to him, looking around the place and giving him a shrug, as if she herself didn't know either. He gave her a faint smile back, a little awkward smile, as if acting a little unsure what to do himself now. Well, I do find moments of happiness, and I thank you for your visit. It's kind, and I feel glad not to be alone. She offered him a small nod, stepping a little back now towards the doorway. The door was now open. Into the entrance she walked, turning slightly from him now. Well, not happy, but maybe you can find some kind of love, despite the sickness. You know, everyone should find love. Everyone deserves love, said the young woman. No longer did he think of her as this older woman, reading off old woman's advice from some news sheet to him. Suddenly she seemed young, fragile, unknowing, uncertain herself, as uncertain as himself. She seemed. I just don't know myself what to do. I really don't know what to advise you, but just take care, do what you can to look after yourself and others, I guess, was all she could say at the end. And he nodded and said, somewhat half-heartedly, that he would try to, at least some of the time, perhaps. I will try to deal with it. Yes, I will, he said, trying to reassure her now, stood in the doorway, watching her now as she began to leave down the long, cold corridor of the apartment complex. The door was about to leave and close itself, though, as he looked out following her leaving. We'll take care on the journey and watch out for any obstacles, he shouted down after her. I'm fine, don't worry. You take care of obstacles in that house, she yelled back. I will do. I know it well enough now, though. I bet you do. You need to change it all sometimes, though. Get a changer in, she shouted back down the corridor. He really disliked how he would shout casual things down the corridor, not as if a neighbour was overhearing or cared anyway that much. In any case, the corridor was empty. The long row of empty doors were all locked shut and closed, and it was late at night and quiet. She had a fun way of just shouting casual things. I'll get a room changer when you get a life changer. He thought about shouting back, but refrained from doing so. Bye, he shouted down the long dusty corridor that was still cold, and he felt about closing it quickly so it didn't let in the cold draught too long, but still was intent on watching her as she walked up to the glass elevator that opened for her quickly, almost knowing that she would arrive to it, of course, and she was disappeared and gone within it very soon. And now he was left with imagining how he wished the conversation had gone with her, how he wished he'd said more to her, perhaps.